welcome to Comic Books and Chill, the home of the Stash Bros. I'm Mike without Chris this week. My ace will be back with us next week. Today we have a special guest from all the way across the Atlantic. We have illustrator and color artist Roman Stevens in the house. We are hot with Batman artists this season. I can't wait to talk to Roman. But before we dive in, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please comment. All right, I'm gonna do my best Chris impersonation right here. Let's get started. All right, our next guest is a young artist in the game. I noticed his work on Batman Fortnite Foundation, and now he's on the two most recent issues of Batman with writer Zdarsky. Ladies and gentlemen of the Stash Land, we bring to you color artist Roman Stevens. Roman, thank you for joining us.
Cheers, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, Chris will be clapping right now, so I'm clapping for Chris right now. Thank you for joining us. We're gonna dive right on in. First off, I'm just curious about the comic scene in the UK and how you got into the comic book medium as a fan, as a collector, and that aspect.
Yeah, well, I think everyone who's working in the industry started out just as a fan at some point. And for me, it was kind of, I used to read the British comics, which is like the Beano and the Dandy, which my dad used to read when he was a kid. And so I used to have his old tease copies that he used to read. And they're just, like nice little cartoons with fun characters and, talking animals and stuff. But they're really nicely drawn, and I used to love those as a kid. And then at some point, I remember my brother borrowed The Killing Joke off a friend of his.
Yes.
And I came downstairs to have breakfast, and it was on the kitchen table, and I read that and was like, this is sick. Like, I didn't know this. Yeah, just like every birthday or Christmas would get another comic, get The Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, and just steadily worked my way into just, like that was something I was really into. And then once I started pursuing illustration and like went to uni and stuff, it kind of snowballed bit by bit into just really being into comics.
Let's talk about your first work as a professional and what inspired you to take that plunge into the comic book industry.
Well, so I was always like kind of drawing my own little comics, just crap little stuff. But I started just coloring things for fun, and just posting them on Instagram, posting them on Twitter. And I think part of it was just you could take someone else's line art that they've spent 2 weeks drawing, and you could color it and have a finished piece way sooner than if you had to draw it from scratch yourself,
Right.
I think I kind of like that aspect of coloring, that you could just kind of jump into like a Jim Lee piece and you could get a finished piece much quicker than if you were doing the whole thing. So I kind of just liked that and kept on coloring, and then so I could definitely think I could pursue being a colorist. It felt like something that kind of naturally just kind of happened. And so my first job,
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, so my first jobs, like you were saying, were all like a lot of just kind of indie, smaller press stuff, and just did a lot of that, and like a lot on like the Twitter comic book kind of community there, and just doing little 5 pages here and 6-page story over here, and just kind of chipped away bit by bit, really.
When was this? Around what year was this you starting to get gigs and stuff?
Probably like 2018.
Okay.
Like kind of just after I finished uni, but they were few and far between, little like 8 pages. And then that was it for 4 or 5 months, and then something else. And then I think the great thing about comics that I really love is the collaborativeness, and you work with an artist who really likes your work, and then they move on to something else and they want to work with you more, and you work with a writer, and that collaborativeness. So I think that really helps the snowball effect of like getting more work, just because you meet more people, and then if they like your work and you're not an asshole, then they bring you on to the next thing.
And so your artistic influences, let's say because obviously I want to know about pencilers, because that, they're like the ones that are the most notable. But I really, because we're like the de facto color artist like station. So we've interviewed Brad Anderson, Alice Clare, Brad Simpson, David Barron. Who inspired you growing up as far as like as an artist and just in that level?
Well, growing up, I really like when I found Mobius's stuff. That was really like such an influence, and still something that you kind of like when you have your favorite film and you just kind of always dip back and you're like, it's still as good as it was the last time I saw it. And so I think that was something I always really liked. But I do my own, full illustration work and drawing, and so in that regard, any comic stuff that's just really inky and like black and messy and textured inks, that's the stuff that really, from like a illustrating point of view. So like I really love Jock's stuff. And Sergio Topi is a really big influence. His stuff's really nice. I mean, the list goes on. John Paul Leon is probably
we were talking about him last week actually.
His just like shapes of black and white are just so good. Killing Joke definitely was like formative because it was like the first time that I think I guess seen that like adult side of those characters. Obviously you see like the animated series and stuff, and those are definitely more adult, but the Killing Joke kind of pushed that. But yeah, I think the things that always grab my attention are the ones that just have that like something of a bit of kind of slight surrealism or slight kind of craziness, like the Arkham Asylum Dave McKean one, and that is I really love that, and I love just the different takes on every character is just so like it's just so different and so unique, and the world just feels so much like more grimy and like kind of gross to exist in compared to like a regular Gotham, so I really like that, and like the Mike Mignola Hellboys as well.
Oh my God, Mike Mignola, yes. Let's get into your workflow for a second, as far as the programs you use, equipment that you use, and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I do all my coloring just all in Photoshop. A lot of people are pushing me to saying that Procreate, they're really loving that. But it's hard to kind of move away when you kind of get so in the flow and you have your hotkeys and your blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I use Photoshop. I have like a sketchbook in there, just like all of just splatters and print textures, and just like loads of just like natural painting textures, which I scan and then I'll use that on top of my colors, which I think is a really nice. Yeah, because I think there's just something about that, like the natural like paint splatters, or just like just smudging a bunch of ink and like with a sponge, and you cover a page and you can scan that and drop it into your page. And I just think there's something about that. And it just gives it a more natural than the pure digital coloring,
That's a new take. You're the first person I've heard.
I remember seeing Matt Hollingsworth.
Right, yes.
Well, because I saw Matt Hollingsworth do that on Witches with Jock, with all those splatters. And he had a YouTube channel. I think he deleted it and got rid of all his videos. I don't know why, but and I remember him showing like a stack of pages with like loads of watercolor splatters, and he was like, I do all these splatters and I scan them in, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And like I had splatters and I had textures from just from drawing and blah blah blah, and from like being at uni, we had to do a course on just like experiment with printing. So I was like, oh, I've got loads of those. Why don't I just mess around with those? So I think it's really nice. You just add, even if it's just like a 10% over the top of the page, and it just gives it a nice texturedness, and you can kind of sneak in lots of kind of natural kind of dirt and noise, that isn't, it just takes away the polished digitalness, which I think I like.
In the audio world, we call it like the analog feel, where it's like it's more natural, it gives you more of a softer approach versus it being too crispy, with like too digital, too crispy. What do you plan to accomplish in like a day's work? Like a couple pages as a color artist. So let's take it like a workflow as your role as a color artist. I know you're an illustrator as well, but let's say like doing something on Batman, right? Like you were on Batman 132. Like what were some of the goals that we were trying to get accomplished in a day's work?
Well, the goal I usually shoot for, unless it's like a really simple page or like a really crazy detailed page where, you know, that affects it. But my general goal is I try to do 2 pages a day. But, you know, sometimes that I get that, but it's, you know, with this Batman stuff, Miguel's art is like really nice and detailed, so you really want to do it justice. And then you like, you know, it's Batman. I like, that's great. I'm really happy about that. So you're like, I need to go in. Like, I need to make them really happy. I need to like, I can't just be like, oh, it's my 2 pages. Like, I'm done. So everything, it kind of snowballs into taking a lot longer, especially on these jobs where you really want to, like, you know, go that extra mile, add some more effects, render it up a bit more.
Batman, yeah, I see the excitement on your face. That's a question that I have next, and I'm excited to ask it now. Let's talk about your gig on Batman and the excitement. Was there excitement when you got that gig, and how did you get it?
Yeah. I mean, definitely excitement. Yeah, it's just a great opportunity to be able to work with any of those characters and on any of those books. So the first DC thing I did was that Batman Fortnite Foundation with Josh Hickson, and so I had worked with him on another book, Children of the Woods, which was a horror book we did with Dark Horse, which was like really fun. And then DC reached out to him to do that Fortnite book, and like we had worked together for 6 months, and, you know, had a good workflow, and like he felt really not like comfortable to like give me notes, and, you know, we could like talk about the pages and like had a good balance. So DC approached him about that Fortnite gig, and he's such a nice guy. He was just like, yeah, like I want Roman to color it. So then I did that and had my foot in the door and just persistently badgered all the editors to try to give me some more work, and, you know, clung on to hopefully getting more projects, and did some short stories in that Joker puzzle box and some urban legends, and then and then did the backups for these couple issues of Batman. So
you were badgering editors, trying to get gigs, you know, trying to get your foot in the door, right? As a young artist, and then boom, you're doing backup stories for Batman. That's still Batman.
Yeah. I mean, they just emailed like, would you be interested in doing this? Like, we've got this if you're available. And I was like, well, obviously yes. Just, I mean, like, all the editors I've worked with at DC have been really nice, and they make it really feel like, I don't know, it just feels like a nice, like you're working the same that it does when I'm working on like a smaller project or like a Kickstarter project. It kind of just has the same vibe where they are also really passionate about the book, and like passionate about the stories and the characters and like the visuals.
Is Batman, is the title, the backup stories you're working on Batman, is that your most popular title you worked on to date? Like, Batman is like, I think the biggest seller for DC, that title, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Fortnite thing did well because Fortnite is just,
right.
The world is obsessed with Fortnite, so I think that did really well. But it's really nice to work on like the official Batman title, you know, and like be part of that legacy of, you know, number 1, number 2, all the way up. I mean, hopefully at some point I would love to do, you know, like a full arc and a full story, and do like, you know, like Court of Owls, and you've done all those issues and you have a whole thing. That would be great.
I can see that happening, man. Keep badgering them. You'll be on. I can see that happening.
The fine line between like just annoying them or being persistent and they give you more work.
Right. All right. Let's talk about process now, and how you approach your colors, and also how colors themselves impact the overall illustration.
So I've got here's can you see that? Is that working?
Yes, sir.
Sweet. So this is go full screen. So this is a page from Batman 132, drawn by Miguel Mendonca, which I mean is a crazy page. And I mean it's Batman, but it's actually not Batman because it's Superman. But obviously it's in Batman 132. So yeah, so this is basically what Miguel will send me. I think this page he did do some grays, which some artists will do grays, well they'll do a mid-tone, and that'll be like a flat lighting of the whole thing. Which is always
Miguel does his own inks as well.
I think he does do his own inks, yeah. I think I've seen him process on like Instagram and stuff, and he's images of him with like pens and ink and stuff. So I'm pretty sure he does his own inks. Yeah, so he will send me this, and then the first thing I'll do will be to like get it flatted. So I've been working with some flatters. Sometimes I'll flat it myself. It just depends on how busy my schedule is really. But like a page like this, like if I'm busy, that's going to take like an hour up to maybe an hour and a half to flat it. So if I'm busy, I'll outsource that to a flatter. And then flatting is just the flat colors, like the flat color values, right? Yeah, so just basically just making the selections. So, you know, every aspect, like his coat, his hair, his skin, like they all need to be separated so you can go in and, you know, select that thing and like color it. Right. So like all the smoke needs to be separate from the building so you can like color those things individually. So it's just going in like to all the little details like this and being like outlining all these little sections, you know. So it's just really laborious. Every colorist hates flatting.
Right. But the flat process, is that still all one layer? Like, so are you putting all the flats on one layer, or does each color have a layer, even in the flat process?
So I think generally just one layer, but I'll then go in and like chop that up. So I like to have all my figures on a separate layer.
Gotcha.
So then I can like just click on figures, and all of these figures, you know, I'd like to have them on a different layer so I can select them and just much easier work on the figures, because you're always going to have to do that more than you would on, like you're going to have to kind of work into the figures. So I like to have them on a separate layer. So also if you outsource to a flatter, they normally just do it completely random colors because, you know, otherwise kind of might influence your color choices. So then I'll go back to make everything. I like to just start with everything being like the local color, so the color that it is. So on every page of like the whole book, you know, Toyman will start at the exact same color. Like he'll start, the green of his suit will always start the same. And then once I've got this, then I feel like I can add on top and like start, you know, actually like coloring the scene and like building the palette. So the first thing I normally do is like just kind of add some kind of darker shadow, you know, to pull everything together, and then you can see like I'm picking out certain bits that I want to be brighter, and then paint. That's like the first stage, is like I'll paint in this bold bit of light. So for this, like I wanted it to be a bright sunny day, kind of contrast like the chaos of what's going on, you know. So by making everything darker and then like painting in like this really nice orangey pinky light, it just kind of worked quite nice to like pull everything down, and then you can lift up the bits you want to lift up. And then so then I just kind of go normally like piece by piece. So like the smoke there, like I'll work into the smoke, and then you can see like the light, you know, comes across that, and slowly just kind of work through this. Like do some work on the figures down here, like Superman comes into focus, and then like do the ground and then add those shadows, and I kind of just like chip away at each like section, like okay, I'm gonna do focus on the ground, do that, and then I just kind of like bounce around, you know. So then just like making everything lighter, filling in, you can like see it starting to take shape.
How much influence does the penciler have over some of the color choices? Is there like some notes given before, or does the penciler give you your first stab at it and then tweak after?
So sometimes the artist will say like, oh, by the way, on like page 7, I was like thinking you could kind of do something like this, or like, oh, I like, I like the idea of just this being really like a red evening, like dusk. That would be cool. Sometimes they just don't say anything at all, and then the only note you're kind of working off is what it says in the script, where it says it's daytime or nighttime. Sometimes it will say it's dusk, because then the next scene is going to be like the evening, and it's meant to kind of lead in. But like this page, I think just said daytime, and no one gave me any notes really towards anything. So you have free reign for it to be a sunny day, an overcast day. It could be a rainy day. It could be a really sunny day where like everything's kind of bluer, or it could be really orange and or it could be, twilight and it's like pink light, and like it's all just kind of like up to the colorist really.
Wow. So there, that's a lot of wiggle room there with the tone and the mood, because the colors. Can you go back to the black and white one? We can just go from black and white to colors for 1 second before you get to your final evolution stage.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So like right now, it's like there's no real context of mood here, right?
Yeah.
So that's all interpretive. Am I correct in saying that? So you have to interpret that mood. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, especially when you're working with an artist who does like they don't have many blacks on the page. There's not much ink. It's quite like what they call like Lin Claire, like clean line, like Mobius, where they're just using thin outlines. Then that artist will draw a daytime scene the same they would draw a nighttime scene, like the sky is just left blank and there's no bold shadows and blah blah blah. And so that's just fully up to the artist to interpret that. Like I remember when I worked with Josh Hickson on that horror book we did, there was a funeral scene and like 2 characters come out of the church and they have a conversation, and so I made that scene like really grey, and like really like the sky was just like different tones of grey, and it was like a really kind of like like light rain, like when it feels like you go outside and you're like it's about to chuck it, like it's about to rain. And he was like, I wasn't going to do that at all. I was going to make that like if I coloured that, I was like when I was drawing it, he said he was imagining it being a sunny day, but then he was like really happy with the outcome. So I think like I don't know, obviously I haven't worked with every single artist, but in my experience they're more than happy to just let the colorist do whatever they want.
It's very interesting, and I think that's a cool when you mentioned about the collaborative process amongst the talent in comics. I think that's a cool dynamic that you get some enjoyment out of, where you can get some for the lack of a word, ownership, not in the business sense, but in the creative sense, where you can feel like you're a part of the overall piece. So now we got the colors back. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had to, because that was a big, huge point to extract about color artists, that they really add to the mood and the tone of the composition.
I think often they're doing a lot more like of the heavy lifting than people think they're doing. I think when you hear coloring, people like you just kind of think you're coloring in. But I think that like aspect of the mood and like the atmosphere, and like when I will work on a book, if I'm lucky enough to get all the pages, or at least like a big batch of the pages, because sometimes you just get drip fed 2 pages one day, 2 pages the next day. But on some projects I might get 10, 15 pages or all 20 pages. Then I'll go through and like open them all up in one big image and like color plan the palettes. I like look at the script and be like, okay, so there's like a moment someone gets shot. I'm gonna focus like that scene where they get shot to be like the red scene because it's like intense, and then I'll have the rest of the issue be blues and greens, because then when you get to this red, it's gonna feel like a real impact, and like that's gonna feel like that intense scene. But in some ways, it's kind of like if you were working on a film and you're like the dude doing the lighting,
right?
And you're thinking like, oh, it's a fight scene. Let's like have red neon lights, I think that is kind of a similar vibe to being the colorist on a comic, where you kind of are deciding those things.
That's awesome. So okay, so what phase in the process are you here?
Yeah, so here I'm kind of doing basically just like rendering like all the aspects. So you can see, like if I rewind, like you can see all the people here. Zoom in, and you can see all these people running away, and like, okay, yeah. So, sorry. Yeah. So I'm just kind of rendering in basically all the aspects.
And this is with like a Cintiq pad, and you just give a pen. How do you doing this?
I do it all with this 10-year-old Wacom tablet, which I've been meaning to upgrade for forever, but it still works, and I just use that, and a pen and just Photoshop, and I just go in and paint in all the aspects. So like you can see there, just like paint in the kind of rim light on this main figure, and light in that background, add some more light, and generally just kind of go bit by bit. So you can see here, like just darken the smoke, brighten the light,
right,
add a different kind of sky, and I kind of just work through and like in my head have like a mental checklist of like, okay, yeah, that building, that thing, I need to do the sky, and the things all kind of tick off,
right.
And I generally work kind of with like a core. It's normally a bunch of layers, but like painting the lighting through everything, and then going through and painting the shadows into everything. Mm-hmm. And generally trying not like those things don't cross over, and so if it's a bright scene, it will be like I'll make everything dark, and then I'll go in and paint all the lighting in. And if it's a light scene, I generally will make the whole scene like really bright, and then go in and just like darken everything up.
And so with this image already flat, how long does it take to you to finish this?
I'd say this page probably took longer because it's quite a like a busy page. There's lots of little details, lots of little figures, and lots of these little, like all these windows and all these cars and boulders and and it's like a big impact page, so I want it to look really good. So generally I'd say the pages probably take like 4 to 5 hours, but this one probably took like maybe like closer to 7.
Wow.
Yeah, but then maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just slow, because sometimes I see colorists say they do like 5 pages a day, and I'm like, there's no way I can do 5. But
it's funny that there's people that are super fast, and then there's people that go their pace. But what's funny is everyone, regardless of how fast or slow, it's all about how you interpret what you're doing, and long as the end result is there. This page is beautiful, and it looks like a Superman page. It looks like, that's what's so cool about this. You're in Metropolis, and you're given this mood that we're not in the Batman environment anymore, but it's chaotic, and it's totally different. Just the way it's colored from it would be Gotham in the daytime, because even Gotham in the daytime, it still gets night vibes. Still, Gotham gets night vibes like kind of 24/7.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever it's like Superman or Metropolis based, it's always kind of leaning into yellows and sunny, beaming sun, which works really well if you're bouncing between Metropolis and Gotham. Then you really need to like let the audience know like we're in a different place now. Because if it cut to Batman in a Gotham alleyway and I colored it the same as this with this bright sky and everything, it wouldn't really make any sense, and people wouldn't know that you've moved. So yeah, you've like, I don't know, those things kind of work quite nicely. I think that's why Superman and Batman work so well as like a duo, because they have so like just visually different in so many ways,
Last question about this image here. Is it in its final incarnation right now?
No, so it's still got a little bit to go. So you can see, like, I can talk through this, I guess. So like You can see here, like rewinding, just building up the detail in like where you want the viewer to, like the reader to be looking. So like this main figure will get like this other level of detail, so you can like zoom in, and then like you can see that his face here has now got these other shadows. You know, there's texture in his trousers. He's got kind of a bit more kind of, you know, that he's got an extra level of detail compared to these other figures who aren't as important. And so then, you know, adding in more shadows, making the sky reflect in the windows of all those skyscrapers.
Wow.
And then here is what we call color holds. So like changing the color of the inks. So you can see like the T-Rex here is a black ink drawing, but then here the inks are now red. Right. So that is to create the depth and like a sense of depth and a sense of perspective. So you're kind of pushing everything back, and then it pulls everything in the foreground forward. And then here, this is the final page. And so it has a much nicer kind of sense of depth and a much kind of bolder, you know, sense of scale. We've added that sky, which was a note from Chip actually, to add this sky in the bottom left, to kind of separate Superman out a bit, and that's the.
So
that's the
this is it right here, man. This is beautiful. So my last question about this great, beautiful image here, Roman. It's done. Your pages are done. You send it back to Miguel, and boom. Like, what's the reaction? Like, what kind of feedback do you get
Hopefully it's good reactions when I send them.
Is there any feedback discourse between the penciler and the color artist once the product is over? Like, even before it gets to print, because obviously it's going to look a little bit different in hand, but at least on the screen, high-res image, is there expectation to kind of communicate, or once the relationship is already established, it's just kind of like, you know, business as usual? Definitely some communication, and definitely more like at the beginning of a project. I think artists they must think in the back of their mind, like, is this guy just going to ruin my art? Like, when they're working with a colorist for the first time, they must feel a bit like, you better not just like screw it up. So I'll usually finish the pages and maybe send a batch of 10, or sometimes just send the whole issue, usually to, you know, like an email thread with the artist and the writer and the editors, and then everyone is just kind of like, you know, if anyone's got any notes, let me know, and I'll tweak the pages and send them back. And so sometimes people will come back with some notes. Usually it's small things like, you know, changing, I don't know, the color of a sofa, or, you know, just details that people with their like fresh eyes think that looks a bit off. Sometimes it's like, you know, you've missed, you know, I don't know, Batman's belt, you didn't color it brown, because it's like things like that slip under the radar. Right. Especially if you're doing characters that have like loads of crazy costumes, like Harley Quinn with the one pigtail is red tipped, like dyed, and the other one is dyed black on the end. Right. So then you're on the page with Harley Quinn, and I'm constantly thinking the red is on the right, so she's looking like this. So this one is red, that one's black, and trying to like get that stuff right. So they'll generally give notes like on things like that, like continuity get stuff, I guess. Right. But then once you at least do an issue, or like, you know, you start getting in the flow, people generally seem to kind of trust what you're doing, and like, you know, generally kind of give you less notes the more you kind of work with an artist. But like here, like I said, Dick said this sky in the bottom corner. See, I just kind of had it like this, and he thought, oh well, what if we add that sky? And I think it looks way better. Yeah, really that's awesome. That is awesome.
And really works well. So yeah, often the notes are good. But then, yeah, you know, I think every everyone wants no notes really, because then you're just done. You don't have to go back into it page you've already spent hours working on. I can run through this one more time so you can see the process in one go. And you can just kind of see all the light and everything kind of take shape. All the way through, and then you get this. Yeah.
Dang.
And then, like you said, it always turns out different when you finally get the physical copy, you know, which is always another tricky thing, because often you will do the colours and then you need to, before you send them off, you've got to tweak them to try to make them print as best as you can.
Right.
Because you're not going to be able to print neon greens. You're not going to be able to print like bright pinks and purples. They're just not going to print well. So often you have to kind of really tweak and adjust the levels and the darkness and stuff.
All right, so Roman, is there a dream character that you haven't worked with that you would like to take a stab at?
Well, I mean, I know we've talked about Batman a lot, but I would love to do a really dark, like a real Batman horror. You mentioned Commissioner Gordon when we were talking about Killing Joke, and I'd love to just do like a Gordon or like a GCPD like only story and do something. I really enjoy working on horror stuff. I think you can, like we were saying, like you're adding in the atmosphere and the tone, and when it's horror, that is like a really heavy aspect of a horror book, is the like building that atmosphere and that tone and like putting in those creepy colors and stuff. So getting to do some real kind of like horribly violent Gotham police thing, that would be fun. Yeah, I think it depends on what the story and what the art is, you know. Because if it was like a really cool project where like the story's really interesting and the art looks wicked, and it's like, yeah, that would be great to work on. But that's more exciting than something that's like a really big character where I'm not that into the art or the story, you know?
Right.
So I think those aspects kind of intrigue me more.
Okay, so stash question here. We're the Stash Bros. We're huge collectors. I don't know if you got a chance to check us out, but we're all about comic books, signatures, and all that jazz. Do you collect comics or toys or art? Do you have a stash of anything?
Yeah, so I've got a pretty large stash of comics all around, all just out of frame, which is also getting bigger and bigger because now that I've started like working more and more like properly in the industry, obviously they send you comps of everything you work on, which just starts to add up. So I'm getting a lot, and I've only really been working for a couple of years. So I was like, you know, if you're Alex Sinclair, you must have a second house that's just full of comps. Like, you must be crazy. But yeah, no, I've got a bunch of comic books.
What's like your favorite comic book that you own, like that's in your collection, something that you've had for the longest time that you cherish?
Maybe two things. The World of Edina by Mobius.
Okay.
Love that book. Really good. The Inkle is great, and everyone always talks about the Inkle, but I love that Edina book. That's just so good. And then I've got every copy of Akira, and that
really.
Yeah. I'm not much of I like anime, but I haven't read much manga. But I got all of that. Akira's
epic, legendary. Come on. I mean, I don't have that, so I'm kind of jealous that you have it. So that's cool. Wrapping things up with you, Roman. Is there anything else you're working on that you would like the Stash fam to know about?
Well, I've just finished a horror book called Specs, which was with Boom, with Chris Sheehan on art, and we've just wrapped that up. So if you're into 80s kind of teen horror vibes, with some good, a good art at the center, like of the relationship at the center of the story, really good. Really proud of that book and really happy with the response to that. So the trade for that should be coming out at some point soon. So keep an eye out.
Specs on Boom?
Yes.
Specs on Boom.
And going to be part of a Kickstarter called Tyrant Fall. This is issue 2. We did the first issue. maybe last year, and that should be fun as well. So keep an eye for that. And then just the next Batman issue, 133.
That's coming out soon, like in a week or so, right?
Yeah, I think that's coming out next week. So pick that up. And
how many more Batman issues are you slated to be on?
2 more, so just 133 and then 134. And that's
all right. And then you're gonna start harassing those editors.
Already have. I'm already a step ahead. Yes. Well, hopefully next time we chat, I'll be on. I don't know. It's the main big book, some global tour. Stadium tours, giving colorist lectures.
That's what I'm talking about. Let's manifest that right there. Manifest it. Roman, we definitely want to have you back, and thank you for joining us and staying up late with us in the UK, man.
Yeah. Well, my pleasure. I mean, I love that you are focusing on the colorists and of the other people that are involved in the creation of the comic stuff. I really think that's really great, and yeah, I'd love to come back on.
Heck yeah, man. Thank you, brother. Well, that's all for our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe and hit that like button. We are the Stats Bros. I'm Mike with Roman Stevens. We are out.